So hi everyone, thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Sam Babiak and I'm the Program Director and Member Services Director for the Writers League of Texas. Before we get started, we have a few announcements. So tomorrow night we have an upcoming online class, Writing Vivid Scenes with Jessica Wilbanks. The registration for that closes tomorrow at 5 p.m., so there's still time to register. We have another class coming up on Saturday, Writing About Trauma with Rachel Starnes, and the registration for that closes on Friday at 5 p.m. as well. And a reminder for our members, open office hours are now every Wednesday from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. So you can have a phone call for 30 minutes with any WLT staff member to discuss your writerly questions. And you can email member@writersleague.org to book your appointment. So we have partnered with BookPeople once again, and we're going to be sending out a link with any books mentioned, as well as the books that we've mentioned in our past live events, so you can buy books from them. But we also want everyone to know that you should totally be supporting as many indie bookstores as possible. So just to name a few, Bookwoman is here in Austin, Larkin Owl in Georgetown, Interrobang Books in Dallas, Casa de Resistencia Books here in Austin. I will say they don't have an online store, but you can sign up to be a monthly donator to help them stay on their feet. And Brazos Bookstore in Houston, and I'm sure there are many, many more. And so on Thursday, April 2nd, we hope you'll join us for Ask Us Anything Query Letters. And this is going to be a live event with Becka Oliver. And you can just ask her anything about query letters. And there's a Google form where you can send in questions ahead of time as well. If you're looking for things to do when you're not attending live events and stuff like that, we do have a podcast, and all of our previous Third Thursdays are on there, so you can give those a listen on any streaming service that you might use. And we also have a YouTube channel. So we're posting all of these live events on our YouTube, as well as some craft presentations that we are recording especially for this time. So you can find all of those on our YouTube channel. And don't forget to subscribe. And lastly, we have this Friday, April 3rd at 6:30 p.m. CDT. Join us on YouTube for the premiere of Finding the Voice of Your Mystery Novel with Michael Noll. So you'll get the chance to live chat with him during this 1-hour craft presentation. It was pre-recorded, but the live chat will be live. And so you can just search Writers League of Texas and subscribe to our channel. And that's it from me.
And I'll just mention that we've had a lot of great folks who've been willing to record some craft presentations that we'll be able to share with people for free during this, well, forever, but especially right now when you're looking for something to do. And Michael was kind enough and was really one of the first people we reached out to, and was kind enough to say yes. And so the way it works is that we did record it, we pre-recorded it, it's a Zoom presentation, and then Michael is being doubly kind by showing up on Friday to answer your questions. So for those of you who are desperate to also ask him about his new life in New Mexico, how Stephanie and the boys are, anything like that, we hope you'll show up for the YouTube live event. What else are you gonna do? Okay, so with that, I'm gonna introduce our panelists. First, I'll say a couple words and introduce myself. My name is Becka Oliver. I'm the Executive Director here at the Writers League of Texas. So if we haven't met before, thank you so much for being here. If you're not familiar with us and just happened upon this panel tonight, please reach out anytime, because we'd be thrilled to tell you a little bit more about what we're doing. But I think Sam gave you a pretty good idea in her introduction. I want to say, just on a personal note, a big thank you to Sam and to Kelsey and to Evan and to our board members and to everybody who has really been just working so hard over the last couple of weeks. Everything we've done since March 19th has been completely built from the ground up from that point. So we really just wanted to do as much original programming as we possibly could to support writers. We wanted to point people to independent bookstores to support them. And we also wanted to see how we could keep supporting authors by having them do craft presentations that we would pay them for. So that's all we're about right now. And we appreciate you for coming along with us. And we hope that you'll reach out if you have any questions for us or you're interested in knowing more. But please know, I just want to say Sam and Kelsey especially, who have worked so hard on every piece of this programming. It's a pretty great staff. If you're going to go through this, it's pretty nice to have them around. So thanks, guys. And I also just want to say that I really have loved the last few of these live webinars we've done. And the biggest piece of that, I think, is not just the great conversations and the willingness of really cool and interesting people to share their time with us, but it's just this community. I was reading today through the Google form where many of you sent in your tips for getting through this time, and many of you sent your questions for the folks here, and we're going to go through them, but they were just so thoughtful and compassionate and interesting, and I give you all credit for being a part of it and just showing up and spending this time continuing to build a community that it can be really hard to sustain when you're all sort of locked away in your home. So I just have so much gratitude for all of you as well. So we're going to start with some bios and then we're going to jump right in. So I'm going to introduce our panelists. First, I'm going to introduce Edward Carey, who's a writer and illustrator who was born in North Walsham, Norfolk, England during an April snowstorm. He has written plays for the National Theatre of Romania. He is a wonderful playwright, wonderfully celebrated playwright, but he's here tonight because he's also the author of the novels Observatory Mansions and Alva and Irva, the twins who saved a city, the YA Ironmonger trilogy, which all the parents out there should pick up for their kids, especially right now while they're looking for something to read, which have all been translated into many different languages and all of which he illustrated. His most recent novel is Little, which took him a ridiculous 15 years to finish, but was definitely well worth the wait and has received a lot of awards and accolades since it published last year, no, 2018. If you can believe it. So it's out in paperback now. We would support or ask you guys to also support that book. He's taught creative writing and fairy tales on numerous occasions at the Writers' Workshop at the University of Iowa and at the Mishner Center and the English Department at the University of Texas at Austin. So thank you, Edward, very much for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. This is great.
Sure. Michael Noll needs no introduction, especially to the Writers League community. He's the author of The Writer's Field Guide to the Craft of Fiction and numerous short stories, which have been published most recently in Crazy Horse and the Best American Mystery Stories Anthology. He also edits the terrific website Read to Write Stories, which features more than 150 writing exercises based on published work and interviews with authors. And I think that website is a great tool, a great place for you guys to go right now to find some inspiration. So thank you, Michael Noll, for being here.
Glad to be here.
Maya Perez is a writer and producer. Her work has appeared in Joyland, Electric Literature, The Masters Review, Misadventures Magazine, and more. She is co-editor of the books On Story, Screenwriters and Their Craft, On Story, Screenwriters and Filmmakers on Their Iconic Films, and On Story, The Golden Ages of Television, all from the University of Texas Press. Thank you for being here, Maya.
Thanks for having me.
And last but certainly not least, Natalia Sylvester is the author of 2 novels for adults, Chasing the Sun and Everyone Knows You Go Home, which won an International Latino Book Award. Running, her debut novel for young adults, is a 2020 Junior Library Guild selection. Born in Lima, Peru, Sylvester grew up in Florida and Texas and received a BFA in creative writing from the University of Miami. Thank you so much for being here, Natalia.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So now I have to find my PowerPoint again. Here we go. All right, so we're gonna go back to, here's what we're gonna do. We have a lot of questions, a lot of much better questions than I probably would have come up with on my own from the folks who are on the webinar. So we're gonna start with each of you individually. I'm gonna ask you some specific questions about the topic at hand, and then we're going to go ahead and move on to the various tips and tricks and questions. So we're going to start with Edward, actually, even though we have Natalia's Lovely. Yeah. Up on the screen. So for each of you, I'm going to pose this question and then give you individual, unique to you follow-up questions. But could you just talk a little bit, Edward, about, the topic tonight is writing during a pandemic. So can you just give us an idea of what that has meant for you so far, meaning being a writer during the pandemic, maybe less on the how you write during a pandemic, because I imagine we're going to find out that a lot of people aren't writing right now, but being a writer at this moment, what is your experience so far?
Well, I have 2 weeks experience of this so far. Of course, it's so strange for all of us. And one of the things that I immediately said to myself is not to panic about writing. I think one of the things you think, now is the time, you've got to get tons of work done. And I'm busy writing a novel, and I've stopped it for this is just my personal experience, just because the novel I was writing about was set in a children's hospital, and it was just too much to be dealing with that subject matter during this time. And I needed to step away from it, to break off. I haven't looked at it. I'll go back to it. Everything's different. I've got, like many of us, I've got kids at home. There's no writing time. And I rushed back from London just over 2 weeks ago. And I was in a packed West End theatre, probably enormously unwisely, about 17 or 18 days ago. We're all taking this on. And I have to say, I think we need to be a bit kind to each other, disciplined, to ourselves rather. Disciplined in what we're doing, I guess. But just, one of the great things about writing, I think, is if you do it just for an hour a day, if we can find that time, that's a huge amount of time just to sit and write. And that's what I've been doing. I've been starting something new, but I've also been going, chill. You can't immediately settle into doing everything, but we do find we have some time now, and so why not use it really wisely? And I think we're all doing that. I hope. We'll hear what everybody's doing. For me, the big realization was I can't write that one book now, but I can write something else. And I want to write that new thing because I love writing that new thing. If the new thing doesn't work, it doesn't matter. It's the joy of writing that.
And can I ask you too, because I follow you on Twitter, and I've seen that you've been drawing every day. Is that right? Is that something that started around the time that you were
Yeah, I'm on day 13 of posting a drawing every day. And I'm just going to carry on doing it until I run out of paper, or I start drawing on the walls and sending photographs of that, or whatever happens for me. And for doing these drawings, they're not about the writing I'm doing now. People have started asking me would you draw, it's the anniversary of Charlotte Bronte's death today, would you draw Charlotte Bronte? Sure, I'd love to draw Charlotte Bronte. And actually just doing something different, a little bit of escape, because one of the main things we have to do as we go through whatever the hell we're going through is not to spend all our time refreshing the news pages and seeing what the hell else is going on. So for me, it's a form of escapism. But people now asking, could I draw? There's been an infestation of goats in a small town in Wales, and they want me to draw a goat. I'd love to draw a goat. Of course, it would be marvelous. So
I saw you reject the suggestion that you draw a squirrel the other day.
Well, a friend of mine in London, after I did reject drawing, he said, I want to bloody draw a squirrel. I'll draw a grackle, sure, but a squirrel? But someone pointed out to me that he thought that all squirrels didn't vote for Trump, and perhaps wrote Moby Dick and things like that. So I thought, all right, well, maybe I'll draw a squirrel or something. Anyway, as you know, it's just... Yeah, we'll talk. I've talked enough. Someone else.
We're good. Yeah. Thank you, Edward. So Michael Noll, you're up next. We're doing this in alphabetical order by last name, guys, in case anyone's wondering. So tell us What has your life been like as a writer right now during this time?
Um, well, I'm starting a new book project, but like Edward, I've got kids at home, and so my life is, kids take up a lot of it, and so I've been their PE and shop teacher, and so we've been doing different projects. My wife is homeschooling them and other subjects, so that's taken up a lot of our time. But they like to read, and so when they read, we try to read. And reading is great. And I've just been reading fun things. I've been reading a lot of mysteries. And I've actually quit a lot of books. I've read a lot of first 50 pages, then I get bored and go on to something else. I find it kind of hard to focus on a single project at the moment because, my emotional state is a little bit like this right now. Some days you think, oh my God, we're all going to die. And other days you think, oh, you're inspired by something you see, or you just feel good about something. So, yeah, I'm reading a lot. I wrote kind of for the first time yesterday, I wrote a few pages, just trying to find a voice that I could sort of stick with for a while. I find that the thing that's most helpful for me right now is anything that kind of grounds me. So, I'm lucky because we're in rural New Mexico now, so we can go into the national forest and like walk around. But, because the news is kind of overwhelming. Being on social media is not necessarily like great for your mental health. And so anything that kind of like just grounds me physically makes it easier for me to think about a story instead of like just thinking vaguely about the future, which is impossible to predict and, makes me feel anxious, and anxiety is not great for writing.
And can you talk a little bit about that experience of this happening and you being in a completely new place? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I moved here ahead of my wife and kids. They came 2 weeks later, just sort of as the entire country shut down. If you got to be self-isolated, being self-isolated in the midst of a national forest is not a bad place to be. And but also like I'm working a new job, via online, which is hard in a community that's not really online. So there's lots of things for me to think about at the moment. So yeah.
Thanks, Michael. So Maya, your turn. Tell us about your life in isolation. Is Maya, I don't have your audio, Maya.
Sorry, Natalia and I were talking about this just the other day that my life actually hasn't changed very much at all. I do all of my writing from home. I was also doing copy editing for a local PR firm that has ended because sadly they mostly represent local restaurants, bars, hotels, and festivals. But even that work I did at home. Producing this TV show, most of the work I do on my laptop at home. The only difference really to my working day-to-day schedule is that I now have my husband and child at home. And I'm ready for them to leave. They're ready for them to leave. My husband is also an artist and a teacher. And so he and I actually, we thrive when we're alone. And, but for our 14-year-old, it hasn't been as easy. She's super, super social. She really misses her friends. But I think what's been really helpful for me is, you feel this, even if you don't have a fear of, say, catching coronavirus, and I don't know why I still have like this teenage mentality that it's like, I'll always be fine. I still feel this anxiety, from the news, from social media. And it's, as Michael said, it makes it really, really hard to focus. I feel like I have like the attention span of like these tiny little, like the little Post-its. So that's what I write my little tasks on. So I can't write too much. But it's been helpful to, one, Hollywood development is still chugging away, and I had a project that I had to turn in, so I didn't have a choice but to work. I used I pulled up the old Pomodoro technique again of, setting my timer for 25 minutes and forcing myself at least start with just, I find that if you just like set a simple task of like, just go through this draft and fix your descriptions and fix your grammar and spelling, your subconscious will start to take over. And then you're like, wait, I actually do have another scene I want to add. Like I do have creative ideas that I want, that are new. But I think having that deadline helped. And then also teaching at UT, my students were the priority. And how do I make them feel as ready for this new setting? How do I make writing as accessible and easy for them as I can? How do I make them feel like they're still part of a community? And so it's been really helpful to think about other people,
right,
besides myself.
And it is interesting for in the Hollywood side of things, it's almost the opposite of a writer's strike, where the writers are all working, but a lot of the productions and other things have sort of shut down. Are there more opportunities right now for writers who are writing for film or television?
There's so many streaming outlets right now, and everyone's hungry for content. So it's kind of like a writer's, game right now. As we all heard in those first 2 weeks, all production on, films and television all shut down. I will confess, I assumed that meant development had also slowed. And so this project, I kind of backburnered and was working on just other stuff around the house. And then I got the call that it was like, hey, just checking in, like development's still working. We're looking forward to getting it. And so it's like, sort of like, I thought we were on a break. I thought we were like on like a global pandemic break. I thought I had like an extension, but no.
Oh no, Hollywood doesn't break for global pandemics.
No,
Maya.
not at all.
Movies got to be made. Thank you. So Natalia, tell us about you, because I imagine for you, you're the one person on this panel tonight who actually has a book that's publishing fairly soon.
Yeah.
And so I imagine there's a little bit of that you've been working on. What's your life during this couple of weeks been like?
A little bit all over the place, to be honest. I think the first, in the beginning, it's just, and I think like most of us, right? The first few days, especially and I think everyone has probably a different day they can recall when everything just felt suddenly very real to them in their direct life. It just felt very like, a lot of things got canceled. My book tour was just kind of like, oh, that's not going to happen anymore. Several speaking engagements, like many authors and artists, those were canceled as well. So that was a really difficult adjustment to kind of have to go from, certain things you're counting on happening and also very much, in some cases, income that you're counting on, to suddenly not have that anymore. That was really rough. And then even just hearing from just wondering about well, what will things look like? My publishing date for running was May 5th. So for a while there, I just wasn't really sure, we didn't know how long. At the beginning, we just didn't know how long this was going to happen. And then each day passed, we could kind of sense, okay, this is actually longer than at least for me, longer than we imagined. I found out 2 days ago, I think 2 or 3 days ago. Who knows anymore? What is time?
What day is it today?
But I did hear from my publisher that they decided to push back the publication date for running to July 14th. And then all the while, and I feel like that is one thing, right? Like the publishing, the side of me that's about the book and the actual journey of this book. But even during that time and leading up to it, I've been trying to work on new things. And I have a pseudo deadline. I try to be very deadline oriented. So I had a deadline that my agent and I had set that I'd been really struggling with even before all this happened. And I kept starting and then restarting and then starting and then being like, nope, that's not how I start the book, and just kind of going back to the drawing board. And in this really strange way, once we started self-quarantining or self-isolating or however we all call it, I think I really thought I wouldn't be able to write. And in this really strange way, I think because what I was struggling with the book was that I kept assuming I knew what it was before I'd started writing it. So I was just kind of thinking already too far ahead into the future without it being written, right? And in those first few days, I think the first things that I personally was mourning was just this idea of a future, of even knowing what any future looked like, right? And eventually I think I kind of switched to this mindset with my book, and I don't think I did it intentionally, but I'm kind of just looking back and seeing what is it that made it finally click, is that suddenly, even though we are all, we might just, like Edward was saying, you decided to to work on a different project because it felt maybe it wasn't just the right topic or mood or, emotional space or whatever that might be for so many of us. Even though we might not necessarily be writing about this right now, we are still writing through the lens of what is happening right now. And so for me, the way that ended up translating to my new book was just I suddenly became very protective of whatever it was in the before of whatever we will be after, right? Because this is it definitely feels like this time in all of our lives that will have a very pronounced marker of a before and after. So what are the things in that before that I suddenly am seeing in a different way, that I'm suddenly appreciating more, that I'm suddenly wanting to protect or to celebrate or to hold closer? What are the things that I'm trying to seek joy and hope from? And it's when I was able to look at the book and the work in progress that I had through that lens, it kind of just changed everything about how I was able to write. So in a weird way, I have been writing, not to say that I've been writing every day, I haven't, but overall I feel like I'm in a better place to keep moving forward with it. And I think in my situation, in my case right now, that makes me feel good. I know that when we talk about this idea of writing right now, a lot of people might feel this expectation of we need to be productive during this time. And it's no, actually, you need to do what feels right for you. If writing is something that brings you hope and that brings you clarity or that brings you escape, then do that. If it's not, then don't. Find whatever else you need right now to get you through this, to become someone who later on down the road, will be able to write about this. Maybe will have paid attention and gone through this in a way that was more that was healthy for you. And so that's really kind of how I've been trying to approach it anyways.
I love everything that you just said, and I wanted to maybe want to ask a question for all of you. If first of all, if you're thinking of your writing in a similar way, or if you're thinking about things in a similar way, the sort of before and after. But beyond that, I wonder if you guys, do you journal? Are you documenting this moment in time in your own lives through the written word in some way? Is anyone doing that?
I mean, I've never been a journaler, so I don't feel inclined to start now. And it's kind of, I'm not one who sort of writes about the present moment, but I do find that the uncertainty of everything, we have no idea, when self-isolation will end. In New Mexico, we're certain to kind of, because sort of the closest big town of Taos has canceled everything for the summer. And so we're beginning to live under the expectation that things are going to be shut down for a while. And so in some ways it sort of matches just the writing life and publishing life, because you have no idea when your book will get published, how it will go, if it'll get published. You don't know when you're going to finish your book, how it's going to go. And so it's a little bit refreshing, because you're I've got a book that's, some people are reading. I've got a book that I've started, but I have no idea what world it will come into, when that world might be ready for it. And I'm certainly not sure about when my own situation will be ready for it. So, it's the exterior world matches my interior life right now.
I'm not a journaler either, and I'm definitely not writing about this experience, but it was really disconcerting to realize, I think maybe after the first week of self-isolation, that I didn't, it's, the joke of is it Blur's day? I have no idea what day it is. I don't know if this was yesterday, if this was 4 days ago. So I've started documenting just everything that happens now in a day. Just the dumb stuff, just like what was eaten, who I spoke to, what I read, what I watched. The small.
Are you doing that on Post-it notes, or are you doing that in a journal, in the notebook?
No, I do that in I still keep like a day calendar.
Mm-hmm.
So it's in there. And I don't know why it's important to me to know how much time has passed, but it is. It's important to me to know what was 2 days ago. And I found then that by keeping track of time and what I'm doing, because I also felt like time was just oddly, even though we're stuck at home, I felt like I'd wake up and then it was 6 o'clock at night. And I was like, I don't even know what I did. Like I obviously didn't leave. I didn't have meetings. I wasn't stuck in traffic. I wasn't in a store, but a whole day's gone by.
Yeah.
And it just scared me, as Michael was just saying, it's like, we have no idea when this will end. But I also don't want to sort of like wake up and like have 5 years have passed and I have no idea what I did with that time. So that's, it's been helpful to just like write down and document, every daily activity. And I've also started, now taking a daily hour-long walk, and I schedule a phone conversation with a different friend or family member. So I know that happens like every day,
Does everyone else feel like March is the longest month that we've ever had in the history of all months?
Yeah, absolutely.
Edward, Natalia, do you have anything to add to that at all?
I don't write a journal either for myself, but for me, actually just doing these drawings every day, making myself doing a drawing every day that has to be at least half decent so I can send it out onto the internet, gives me some sort of sanity. But I have begun a new project, and I remember when I wrote my first novel, you kind of, when you write your first novel, you're in a sort of state of sort of bliss, and you're doing it for it. You've no expectations of what comes afterwards. You don't know about all that world or anything. You're just trying to get back to that. I'm trying to get back to that state where it's just about, if nobody sees this, it doesn't matter. Am I enjoying writing it? Yes, I'm actually really loving writing it. Where's it going to go? I don't know. And it doesn't matter. The next day, where's it going to go? I don't know. Another strange character? Sure, why not? Let's have him in too. Let's have her in. Let's have a strange, creature climbing up the walls. Why not? You have all permission to do whatever it is that you want to do. And just even spending these small pockets of time, just doing that, even if it's just an hour a day, is actually, that's enough for me. And that's kind of the journal, because here I am with my wife and kids. The scenery is not changing very much. And it's not going to, unless you're actually in a hospital having a really hard time. This is going to be our scenery for the next however long.
Right.
And there was this extraordinary novel, I think it was written in the 1700s, well, a memoir called A Voyage Around My Room, which was written by someone called Xavier Mestre. And he was on house arrest. And he just wrote about the odyssey of a room. And that was kind of suddenly, that was enough. There we are. There's the world there. I mean, we've got to be patient, and we've got to be calm, and we've got to love doing little things. So I know it's really hard sometimes if you've got kids or whatever, pushing, making the day wonderful, but also giving you less time, just finding those little pockets of time just to do a small thing. I think that's it. I think that's perfect.
Well, and I love that you're sort of taking that idea that we're pressuring ourselves and saying, you have so much time, you should be producing, and saying instead, no, think of it as an opportunity to just get back to what you love about writing, to be playful with your writing.
Yeah. Exactly. Go back to that almost childish feeling about it. You can't pressurize yourself. You know, okay, everybody's saying, you know, Shakespeare wrote King Lear during a play. Well, good for him. We're not going to do that. We'll do something else. You know, that's fine. It doesn't matter what we do. But finding little bits to help us, remembering that, you know, that writing, something thinking about, you know, writing as a job or anything, writing as pure pleasure.
Yeah.
I think it's
I
also.
agree.
Go ahead, Natalia.
Oh no, I just think it's funny. Like, so much of writing is for, at least for me, anyways, is a way of processing things. But I have to let time pass in order to do that. I don't do it in real time. You know, it's not like I'm on call and that's like I have to do that today. So sometimes I often don't journal, which is strange because when I was younger, I mean, I have journals for like every day of my life, starting from like the time I was 5 to 18 or something. And I would love to get back to that, but I think what I end up doing instead is it's like I'll find little Post-it notes and like, you know, random, or, you know, like the receipt from a pharmacy, you know, like from the drugs that I picked up at the pharmacy or whatever, like random paper that is just like I just squirrel away in places, and I'll have like a line or two there, and I'll just be like, oh, where'd that come from? You know, and I find myself, I'm constantly doing that. So I'm wondering more if like that's become my new way, like with my replacement for it, because maybe it's all I have the bandwidth for sometimes. And then later I can kind of piece those together and kind of make sense of it in that way, like once I've had time to sit with it.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, I think a lot of writers feel that way too, that you really have to give yourself some space and some distance before you can kind of even know what you were feeling in that moment and look back. Yeah, make it intelligible. What were you saying, Maya?
Oh, I was just saying that it's like, I think it's, you know, we do, just to, you know, to what Edward and Natalia were saying, it's like, you do feel this need. It's like, I'm home, I have this time. I don't know why we suddenly have more than 24, like we still have the same 24 hours. But so it's like, I'm supposed to create a masterpiece, but I think it's also okay to remember that being creative in any way is also a form, I think, of writing, and it helps writing. And so it's like, you know, obviously we've seen this like sourdough rage take over. But I think it's setting, what has been really helpful for me is setting tiny little, very accomplishable tasks that, that when they're finished, like I know they're finished. They cannot be revised or looked at again. So maybe it's, you know, cooking something, or I don't know, touching up like the baseboards, or cleaning the, I don't know, trading out like the AC filter. It's something that is accomplishable. And it's the biggest boost to my self-confidence. And that it's like, you know, and it just makes me feel, because I do feel like I have to accomplish something during the day. But I think maybe if we think of it like, it doesn't have to be new pages, or it doesn't have to be a new project. It can be something else that's a little bit creative.
Well, and also having that structure to your day, right? Like I am so glad that I have a 10 to 5 job that I need to sit down at my computer every day and address, because it would be hard for me right now, my personality, to not have that structure. And so even those to-do things can give you that structure too, right? Mm-hmm. And then when you do them, you feel like, all right, the day I accomplished what I needed to accomplish today. How many of you are currently baking bread?
But I'm eating so much of it.
So true. Michael, you got something?
Oh, I was going to just say, kind of to what everybody is saying, especially Edward, about, you know, kind of reminding yourself why you do it. But it's also, there was an introduction to like a Best American collection a while back, where the editor said that she had read the selections while on an airplane, and the ones that could sort of maintain her interest in the midst of the chaos of an airplane were the ones that made it into the book. And I feel that way a little bit now about what I'm reading, about what I'm writing, which is, does it sort of maintain my interest and my attention in the midst of, you know, all this craziness and uncertainty? And if it doesn't, then I'm not going to pursue it, because I mean, I don't have to. I don't have to do anything now except, you know, just sort of like take care of my people and do the things that I have to do. But and that's always true. Like, you don't have to read or write anything that you don't want to. We sometimes forget that. And so, you know, because things are more acute now, I think it's a reminder that if it doesn't sort of fill you with whatever you need to be filled with, then you cast it aside and find something else.
Yeah, and maybe there are some lessons like that that we're all going to be able to carry forward with us when we, you know, even when we get past this moment, right?
Yeah. I will say though, I do find it, one thing that a lot of people say often is like, oh, you know, what do we do with all this time we have now? But I actually haven't felt like I have more time. I haven't felt that way at all. And in some ways, I just think it's, I am trying to, like, what Michael, to Michael's point is, like, I'm just trying to be more like intentional and asking myself, like, is this what I'm wanting to do with my time? You know, because yes, if time is kind of blurring together and yet still on a day-to-day basis, I'm kind of like, well, I guess I don't have time for that today, you know, then what is it that, like, that I'm trying to, like in the spirit of trying to be kind to myself, you know, and trying to just get through this however we can. Is this something that, like, I really actually want to be doing right now, or is it something that I feel like I should be doing right now? But there's a lot of ways in which I don't feel like I know I'm fully aware of how different things are going to be right now, or going forward. But like, I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and I think that if you are someone who, you know, has experienced hardship in any way in your life before, who has been marginalized in any way in your life before, or lives a life as a marginalized person, like, there are ways in which a lot of this feels very familiar. And to have most of this feel like a shock is actually quite a privilege, right? And so there's a lot of things in which that, like, there are people who've been living in, you know, like, a lot of the patterns that we're going through now that feel new, are just how some people have been living. And, you know, I have talked to friends who feel like this is strange because usually we feel in isolation in our hardship. And there's, like, have you ever, like, been going through something so hard that then you walk down you walk around and you see people smiling and laughing as if nothing's happening, and there's almost like a bitterness inside of, like, how can the world keep turning when I'm feeling this way, right? Or when I'm going through this. And in this strange way, we're suddenly now all, like, sharing in that. And it's not to say that, like, I think that's why in a lot of ways this doesn't feel like the shift that, you know, that I thought it would, that some of it actually feels familiar and less lonely, despite the fact that we are having to isolate.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. We're going to jump in, guys. We have a ton of questions and tips for you. So in the interest of not keeping you here too long, we're going to go through these. Sam, do you want to hop on and actually read the tips and tricks? Let's see if she wants to. She might reject that idea. Are you rejecting it, Sam? Oh, there she is. Okay.
No, I'm here. Okay. So tip and trick number 1. For weeks I've wondered why write at all. None of it matters in the face of this disease. The shift in life's logistics and an impending loss of income also helped to throw me into writing paralysis. I tried to trick myself into writing with rewards-based thinking. Write now, cookie later, but I just ate the cookies. That's so relatable. My faraway mom, however, gave me a way out that might be helpful for others. She suggested I frame the task of writing as the reward itself by embedding it into something I thrive on, deadlines and school. So I created a 10-week curriculum for writing myself, complete with assignments and due dates. That includes writing, revision, workshopping, online events, and reading with a commitment about 15 hours a week. Sorry, you just got him my video.
Oh, that's Chester.
Yeah, right here. It's completely shifted the way I'm thinking. The reward is built into the work, exactly where it was hiding in plain sight.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. So we're going to go into some questions, and we're going to alternate. Sam, I'll do the questions and you get to do the tips and tricks. Do any of you have, we've been talking a little bit about this, but do any of you have young children at home? I'm struggling to manage and homeschool my second grader and kindergartner while keeping them out of my husband's hair while he works from home. Having energy left at the end of the day to be creative just isn't happening. I usually write between 9 a.m. and 2 in the afternoon, but those hours are completely booked now. And then we had many questions about this, but a separate question was, what are some tips for writing while parenting and homeschooling? And I think each of you has mentioned the sort of your households and how bustling they are right now. So just anything you can offer that's maybe helped you manage this this moment.
I mean, I think I've got kids here, but they're of an age, they're 11 and 12, and so they're quite self-contained at that age, and they can, you know, do things on their own. And you can say you have to read a book for an hour, and we do that every day, and that's actually sort of a great time of getting them out. It's about balancing. If you have a partner at home as well, of giving each other a bit of time. And of course, you know, you know, you may not have space at home, but just even if you can get some sort of table in your bedroom, just a little bit of space there, you can close a door from you just for an hour. It's really is just an hour. You can surely, you know, try and juggle that. It's harder with younger kids. I know you can say, well, try getting up earlier, but you've had no sleep. I understand how difficult it is, but just little bits. And one of the other tricks to make kind of things, I think, easier coming back is almost try to write yourself to a place where you know what's going to happen next, but you don't write what's going to happen next, so that you return to that the next day with, aha, this is what I'm going to do next. Things like setting up the space so that it's ready for you. If you're sharing it with your spouse, you clear it all away so that he or she's ready to go back there, you know, that it's become a neutral space. Just little things like that, but you don't have to do very much. You know, the thing is, if you're creating a new project, if you're writing a short story, if you're writing a novel, just writing a couple of pages a day, it's tons. That's great. And even that, it just mounts up more and more, and you can steal little bits of time. I know it's not easy, but, you know, just small pieces of time every day, if you can. I feel like you having that little bit, we all need time to ourselves during all this, and that's really tricky to have when you've got a flat family around, but you have to engineer it so that we feel like there's no space to yourself. That's a terrible thing. Even if you can set out for a walk on your own and think, then, you know, there are different activities that you can think about writing all the time, but also not to beat yourself around the head if you're not doing it. But I just think if you can say, if one of, you know, if your spouse is the other, not you, is earning, you know, he's got the job that needs to take up more time, then surely there's enough time for an hour, at least.
Yeah, I would add that, like with my own kids, they're readers, but, you know, we run out of books, you know, physical books, because, you know, the libraries are closed. And so we use Overdrive and Libby, which are two sort of apps that you can use through the library to get ebooks and also audiobooks. My kids have listened to a ton of Hardy Boys audiobooks, which are kind of an experience to listen to if you get to listen to it. And it's like Dragnet for 10-year-olds. But so they read a lot, but also, like, we let them have some screen time, like, you know, like video games and, you know, Roblox or, you know, whatever they're doing, because the days are very, very long. And so even if we do some homeschooling with them and we get outside and do some activity and they read and then we play some games, there's still so many hours in the day. So they're getting more screen time in terms of like video games and TV shows and stuff than they did previously. And then when they're doing that, then we can, either get our work done if we have work to do, or we can write, or we can read, or do whatever we need to do at that moment. But to give yourself permission to like let your kids waste some time as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have one child, a 14-year-old, so similar to Edward's kids, she's pretty self-sufficient. But I still think that the old rule of like sleep when the baby sleeps, and it's like write when the kid writes, it still applies. So it's like, when she's doing her Khan Academy, or she's reading, or she's doing something, that's my hour to get in my writing. It's not easy, but and I think especially because she is so social and like really wants to be with people. And I think in that first 10 days, it was really hard for her, especially because she saw so many friends on social media who were still hanging out together. So she almost sort of felt like we were gaslighting her. But we've tried to find, activities that are sometimes like not in front of the screen. Like she's in charge of like making lunch for the family, or doing yard work or something like that. She's really big on making money right now. So, we can find all sorts of like household and yard stuff for her to do to earn money. But I agree with Michael too. It's like Netflix is a family member now, and that you can have like, the Netflix group chats that she can do with her friends. I think that's awesome. And I mean, I can't speak for the rest of the group, but growing up a latchkey kid who came home and watched hours of television, and I don't think my mom ever thought about like, well, how much screen time is she getting? I'm just like, let her watch what she wants to. I don't care.
Yeah.
It's fine.
All right, we're gonna move to. Sorry, Natalia, you go.
No. I just wanted to add, like, I know like the topic of this discussion is how to write during a pandemic, but I just don't think we emphasize enough that sometimes it's okay not to, because
sure.
No, I'm not saying that we us right now, but I'm just saying like in this general way, like I think it's not always just about time. Like sometimes it's about, yes, maybe you could steal an hour, but do you have the emotional energy to like give that part of yourself? Like we all go through so much on a day-to-day basis that even like, I mean, it's an incredible accomplishment to find a way amongst all this to still be homeschooling your kids, and it's okay with that. Like, it's really okay. If you do find time and somehow you can't get that energy to write, like what, do you need to just kind of sit on your phone for 2 minutes? Okay. If you find that doesn't help you, which I do sometimes, I'll be like, okay, that wasn't good. That was not good for mental health. If I'm being honest with myself, right? I'll be like, okay, I need to just read. Like I will switch to reading at all, like every time that I've gone through dry spells with my writing, the reading is what saved me, to be intentional about it, because that fuels my creativity. So that the next time that I do find that time, I have the emotional energy and the creativity to actually bring to that small bits of time. And I just think that we do spend so much time focused on like this idea of time, but not enough about like, how are we feeling with ourselves in that moment, and it's, yes, there are times that we have deadlines and our livelihoods depend on it and stuff. But I just think we have such a strange relationship with writing as we have to constantly be doing it, or else we can't call ourselves writers. But like, I don't really see this separation between who I am as a person and who I am as a writer. So if I'm like still nurturing myself as a person and whatever I need in that moment, then the writing will come, at the right time. And not to say that like discipline doesn't play a role, and like of course it does, in a routine and persistence and getting back to it. But there's also like this real place of honesty that we have to like check in with ourselves and be like, okay, am I unable to write right now more out of fear or out of like just procrastinating, in which case I would say, no, sit your ass down and write. Or is it really that the world is really hard right now, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question of the panel and also the participants?
Sure.
And that is that I'm curious, Natalia was talking about, reading and what we're reading. And I've found that at home we're we've been rereading a lot of things. Like my daughter's been rereading stuff. I've been rereading books. Like Michael, I'm having a hard time with my attention span and staying with a book for a new book for a long period of time. Same thing actually for films and television shows. I mean, as you can see from my wallpaper, we like have watched The Office so many times. And I wonder, you know, I was thinking that because it's nice to have that comfort and to know how something will end. And I just wondered if anyone else was going back to favorites or struggling with, you know, with new content.
Does anyone on the panel want to jump in and answer that? I know that one of the questions coming up is actually that, what are you reading right now? But so why don't you guys just let us know what are you doing as a reader right now? Like, what is your reading life?
I've been shopping my bookshelves while I wait for the books that I've ordered to come in. So I pre-ordered Richard Santos's debut novel, Trust Me, and I know it might take a few days to get here. And then I was like, okay, in the meantime, I have all these books sitting on my shelf that I know I said I'd get around to one day. So I think one day is now, right? I started reading Tiny Pretty Things by Sona Charaipotra and Danielle Clayton. And it turned out to be like the perfect timing because I bought this book when it came out in like 2015. And it turns out it was part of a duology. So the sequel actually just came out this month. And so I was like, oh, this is wonderful. But kind of going back to what Maya was saying, I think the reason that I started reading it now and not back when I bought it is just that sometimes, sometimes you ever get that feeling like you've read the right book at just the right time. Okay, so this book is about Tiny Pretty Things. It all takes place in like this New York Ballet Conservatory. And it's like these 17, 18-year-old dancers, and it's very like cutthroat and competitive. And you know, when I was younger, I was a dancer, and so I feel like there is something very familiar to me in that. And it just kind of did, even though it's very like mystery and thriller, and they do some horrible things to one another, there's still comfort in it, you know. And it's like a very lovely way of saying like, you know, I actually don't need to think about everything that's happening right now, and I can go back to like, well, you know, what I remember what it was like when I was dancing, and how like horrible, like how hard it was as a teenager. And so that's kind of where I've been at in my reading. Like I'm looking for things that do feel comforting.
I love that you say that, because I think a lot of us probably have mini books on our bookshelves that we said we were going to read, and we just keep buying more, and which we should be doing, all of us. But it's kind of nice to go and discover treasures that you've owned for years, you know. Does anyone else want to talk about their reading life right now?
I'm reading new stuff. I'm one of the, you know, we've got tons of new stuff that comes into the house here, and I'm feeling so much like, Natalia, you've got a book coming out soon. I'm feeling so for the people with new books right now. It's a really hard time with them, and there's so many fantastic books. Right now I'm reading The Mercies by Kieran Millwood Hargrave, which is just outstandingly brilliant. I mean, it's a wonderful book, but some of our students from UT are about to publish, and you're going through that, and it's some of them students I haven't worked with, and so I'm reading some of their work, and there's something actually joyful about saying, this is it, you're doing it. Still, this is a wonderful time to be reading something. Yes, those classics, but also these new stuff that's coming out at the same time, and there's a kind of, oh God, there's a joy. And one of your questions you sent us earlier, Becka, was about memoirs, and a dear friend, I've got it right in front of me here, I feel like I'm touting the book, is Paul Lisicki's Later. It's a memoir of experiencing AIDS in once living in Provincetown. It's an extraordinary book. It's, you know, I don't know why, almost before this happened, I was going back reading old stuff, but suddenly now I want new, fresh blood. somehow. It's just, people really change in different ways, but I'm longing for the new stuff. I'm staring across at a shelf of Dickens, and I'm going, no, mate, not now.
Michael, Michael, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I'm also, I've ordered a lot of books. Richard's book you mentioned, like anybody that I know or authors, if I don't know them personally, but I know of their work, I try to order their books right now because it's pretty hard to be an author. I have a book coming out right now because the usual infrastructure is down. It's also good for bookstores. And unless we want the entire world to be Amazon, which I order books from Amazon too, but if we want that to be the only bookstore, then we need to order books. I pre-ordered a book by, I'm going to remember the name, Winter Counts by David Heska Wambley Wyden. It's a crime novel set on the Rosebud Lakota Reservation. It's awesome. I read the first couple pages of it. It's really cool. But I've also been reading some older books that are new to me. So, because I was at the local library here and I stocked up on books because I knew that the break was coming. And so I got some Le Carre spy novels, which are really wonderful because they're mostly characters talking to one another. Nothing happens, and all of the intrigue is the stuff that's revealed in the dialogue. They're really weird that way. And so I'm enjoying them in part because they're kind of claustrophobic in terms of their aesthetic. The characters are locked in rooms talking, which right now is sort of like, I find entertaining.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're going to keep going but I will mention, since his book has been mentioned a couple times already, that Trust Me by Richard Santos. We are recording this and doing this webinar on March 31st, and today is his pub date. So congratulations, Richard. And I know a lot of people are excited for you and ordering the book and ready to celebrate with you. So on to next tips and tricks.
Tips and tricks. I was recently reminded that your home is usually a comfortable space, but writing is sometimes not a comfortable craft. Try moving a piece of furniture to a new place in the house, like a chair by a window you wouldn't normally sit in, to shake things up and see if this puts you in a new, different space to think and create. I've tried it and it actually worked. Tandy.
Okay, we just did this one. What are you reading right now? Maya, did you feel like you got to answer that? You did, right? Or no?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like everyone else. Like, I feel like I have this giant stack that keeps growing of, like, by my bed of all these books that I can't wait to read, and I want to, and then the ones that I'm going to right now are ones written by people who I know. Mm-hmm. Like right now I'm reading Barnade by Deb Olin Unferth. It's terrific. I also just got Waitu Moore's new memoir.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then Kylie Reed's Such a Fun Age.
And I'll say this too, if you don't have time to read a lot, but you manage to read a book that you really love, and it's, especially if it's contemporary, maybe write a fan letter to an author or reach out to them through social media and tell them what you thought of their book and that you were so excited to read it, because this is a good time also to just keep building community and connecting with each other and, reaching out. So that's my 2 cents. Next tip and trick.
Tips and tricks. I'm going to take the Poem a Day challenge during April at Robert Brew's Poetic Asides blog. Just log in every day and you'll get a prompt for a poem. You can share what you've written if you like. April is National Poetry Month, and if you participate every day, you should have 30 poems at the end of the month. Linda.
All right, and this is the question that Edward was alluding to. Did we lose Natalia, or can I just not see her?
I don't see her.
She's disappeared.
She's disappeared. She probably fell off and will be coming back to us, I would assume. Any specific recommendations for memoir writers? Should I keep a daily journal for future memoirs? Do you guys have anything specific you would offer up to folks who are writing memoir? Anyone?
I mean, so I don't write memoir, but I've spoken with a number of memoir writers, and I think it can go both ways, right? And so your notes can certainly be useful later on. They can also feel like a trap, right? Because sometimes the things that you write down are not necessarily the things that you remember later on that are most important. And so, I mean, as with all things with writing, I think it probably, if you start writing notes and you feel compelled to keep doing so, then do it. And if it just feels like a chore, then it's probably not the best use of your time.
All right. Thanks, Michael. Next, Samantha. Although I want to say something, I'm sorry. Kelsey said this the other day on our webinar, and that was that the idea that what people are writing today is going to be looked at by historians down the road, right? That could be kind of cool for, especially if you're writing memoir, if you write personal essay, if that's what is comfortable for you or what you love to write, that it could just be that we're documenting a moment in history, and kind of like what you were saying, Maya, about writing down everything that you do in one day, that those are things people may look back on at some point and get some insight into, you know, this moment. So, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, that was like the most fascinating part to me about, you know, like the Little House on the Prairie series, was getting to see exactly how to get like maple syrup and then sugar from a tree. And it's just like, who knew? Like I actually, like when I first, like the, you know, when I first read it as a young girl, it was, you know, I was so caught up in the adventure of like the Ingalls family, and then reading it when I was older with my daughter, I was like, this is incredible documentation of history and how you had to live.
Right.
So, you know, so I agree. I think, you know, even if you're just keeping a journal of like, how does our society operate right now? You know,
Yeah.
who knows?
Documenting. All right. Next tip and trick.
Next tip and trick. I love exercising, so I found an app with a 30-day challenge.
And I think this is great because it speaks to what Natalia was so eloquently talking about earlier, which is that it's not only about, you know, what you're doing in terms of your craft or writing, but it's about taking care of yourself. And a lot of folks who wrote in talked about meditating and different, I think we have one coming up about a meditation app that they really love. What kinds of things, I guess I would say to you guys that, you know, Maya, you talked about taking a walk every day. Are there other ideas that you have for folks about what they can do to just take care of themselves right now?
Well,
I go biking with the kids, or my wife will go biking with the kids, we'll go walking with the kids. All that is doing a little bit of running. It does help that you've got to get out of the house. Well, we still can. We may not later on be able to get out of the house. We don't know that. So to make sure that we definitely get out now, keeping a good distance from everybody, but actually there's something very good for the soul. I'm sure everybody else's experiences as you walk out, everybody's waving to each other and keeping their distance and smiling, and there's actually, each time that happens, it feels like a blessing from one to the other, and so all that is essential.
Yeah.
I was telling a friend that it's a really good way, it's a really good time to check in with yourself in terms of all those things that we say, like, oh, I'll do this when, you know, like when you have a perfect weekend or whatever, like the little things you daydream about doing, even if they're really small, like do those things. So that's different for all of us, you know, like, you know, but like for me, for example, like we bought a hammock, like, I don't know, 6 months ago. And I really thought like, I'm going to spend every weekend there. And I don't, but you know, I am trying to like be more intentional. I'm like, even 5 minutes on that thing, like just laying there reading a book. So yeah, just kind of like checking in with yourself and like, what is that you're really wanting to do?
Yeah. And getting fresh air. Getting fresh air is so important. And that I'm the same way with my hammock. I haven't been in it in forever, and now I sit in it every day, and I love it. I agree. Maya?
Yeah, I feel like I'm worried, as Edward said, it's like I'm worried that there may be like a day when we can't be walking outside. And of course in Austin right now, we're so lucky. It's just brilliantly green and gorgeous right now. I also worry that we won't be able to get fresh fruits and vegetables. So we're trying to consume as much of that as possible. And I think I think like one thing that's maybe changed is before the like self-isolation, I used to feel like I need to like get up and make my coffee and like get to my laptop and start writing. And I think now deciding like that the first action of the day, and I say this, I'm aware of my privilege that it's like, but do whatever I want to do first thing. So if that's staying in bed and just rolling over and like reading a book, and like that's the first thing that I do, or is it, you know, stretching or doing some yoga, or is it, you know, getting coffee and just checking email and, you know, going through social media, to not feel that the first thing that I do has to be a productive thing in any way. It's truly whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
I bought some laser tag guns, and my boys and I have been going out, in our case, you know, to the forest and just playing laser tag, which involves a fair amount of running. And so that's a way to get exercise and also to wear the kids out. And so I find that useful, and it's fun. And so, and it gets us out of the house, you know, like while we still can.
So you're playing laser tag with your family, not with strangers.
Right. No strangers. Self-isolation.
All right, we're going to go to the next question, which I, oddly enough, cannot actually read because my panelist thing is in my way. Let me get rid of it. No, I can't get rid of it. Can someone else read the question?
Sure. The question is, any thoughts on how to deepen the conversation with oneself, one's writing, and with others? I have no depth at all right now, so I'll leave this to other people.
Does anyone have some depth to share?
Maybe we can do the opposite. Like maybe we could just be like, we need to remove that expectation of everything being deeper. But I think we've been talking, I think like, oh, go ahead.
Okay, Natalia, please. Sorry.
Oh no, I just feel like a lot of what we've said already kind of goes towards that same point, right? Of just trying to really like check in with yourself and listen, and then like, trying, go out if you can, go out for a walk, or, I mean, I think even just, like finding I think we are kind of, as humans, we are driven to want to find a sense of accomplishment and purpose in things. Like we just can't help that. But it can be in other things. Like it's like, make yourself a nice, like make a meal, like try a new recipe, or, any small thing, like try like a different app. That there's just like so many apps now that are free that allow like for meditation. So I don't know. That's just a few suggestions.
I would say that like, I mean, my wife and I, and anybody else on social media, like we talk about the coronavirus and all that stuff a fair amount because it's on our minds, right? But I'm seeing lots of people, trying to think about anything else, and so gardening, or whatever you want to do for fun, or books you read. Like, I mean, and I don't know if this is particularly what the question is answering or asking, but like trying to understand or deepen our understanding of what is happening now is kind of impossible because it changes every day. And I actually want to spend less time with the news because it makes me feel crazy. And so, I mean, just to let my mind go where it wants to go that's not there is, I think, very pleasurable and good for me.
I'm absolutely with you there, Michael. I mean, and I'm sure everybody thinks the same thing. If don't spend hours and hours at looking at the rates of what's happening in different countries as the news trickles in. One of the things that I need to have, because my brain is so undisciplined, is a computer program called Freedom. And I don't know if anybody else uses that, but you can get it, and it basically, you use your computer, but it takes you away from the internet, and you can choose how long it takes you away from the internet. And for me, it's wonderful because I can just sit and look at how my country way over there is surviving or not. And it can take the whole day up, and actually it's not doing me or them any good. I do think, cutting it off, actually, you'll come back to it. It's not going to, it's not going to disappear without you.
The only thing I'll say about deepening conversation and maybe reading the question in a different way is that I have found that I have had longer and more enjoyable and sort of, just really interesting, not surface conversations with people in my life than I had for a while before this. Meaning, you know, I started Zooming. That's what I call it. It's a verb now. With my brother and his wife in Florida, and we talked for an hour the other day over coffee, and it was the longest that we've probably talked to each other in quite a while because we don't stay on the phone for an hour. My California relatives, my friends. So I think that's a way to deepen it. I think that people, you know, who are, you know, reaching out to the people in your life and really having substantive conversations with them can be that's been the biggest joy, I think, for me of this time.
Yeah, I agree. And that's, I think I had mentioned before, it's like on my walks, it's like I scheduled them now with like a friend, and it's an hour and a half long, just catch up with them. And I never did this before.
Yeah. So let's go to the next tip and trick. We're going to keep going because I know we're starting to go a little long.
The next tip and trick is from Carey. It's helpful to have a community of writers to talk with as we all struggle right now.
So true. So keep finding community. I love this one because I know how Michael Noll feels about Jonathan Franzen. So here's our next question. Jonathan Franzen said he used to take showers in the middle of the day to refresh his mind so he could continue writing in his apartment. But that makes me want to take a nap. What is a quick trick each of you do to refresh yourself and or to psych yourself up so you can continue writing at home, especially when you're sick of your own surroundings? So we've already talked about the pressure to write, so let's just say, what's something you do when you just feel like you need to refresh yourself during the day, whether it's to refresh yourself to teach that next homeschooling, you know, topic to your kid, or refreshing yourself to do that next drawing, or just refreshing yourself to, you know, stare at the same surroundings over and over again. Do you guys have any tips for how you give yourself a little refresh during the day?
Well, so we had asked our daughter, like, you know, you have this time, is there anything that you've been wanting to do that you now, you know, have the time to do? Is it like a hobby or an art project or anything like that? And she was like, you know, I want to get abs, like a 6-pack. So she has, you know, dream big. So she's like been doing these like 10-15 minute abs workouts several times a day. So that's now my new breakup, is I do an abs workout with her.
All the other kids want abs. Your daughter wants abs. Anyone else have a little refresh? Michael, are you taking a shower like Jonathan Franzen every day?
No, I will shower less because he said that. I'm actually showering less, so when I do shower, it feels quite good. I find that if I just go outside and look up at a tree, I think trees are nice. Looking up like through the branches at the sky is nice. Being outside is nice. And that's something you can do for a minute or two, and it'll just make you feel better.
Yeah. Anyone else? All right.
It's kind of silly, but
What
I
is
have
yours?
this one
Be
sweater.
silly.
Like, I have this one sweater that I've had since I was 16, and it got me through a hard time. It's like blue and oversized, and it's ever since, it's always been my writing sweater. Like, I put it on and I write. Like, and I think it's because it probably just brings comfort and safety. And so I'm like, yeah. And also I can't write if I'm cold. Like, I get cold very easily. But I've noticed it's become kind of like a psychological thing too, of like, oh, now it is time to write there because I'm wearing the sweater.
Yeah.
Silly, but it works.
Yeah, I also break things up with meals. So it's like breakfast 1, breakfast 2, early lunch, late lunch, you know.
Mm-hmm.
They're like 6 meals in every day.
And they all have bread.
You can go online and go through various galleries, great museums around the world, and actually just taking a few steps in a museum and looking at what they have and sitting in front of a painting just for a tiny amount of time is actually resets me. Actually, it makes me feel, okay, this is fantastic. You can't get to them, but you kind of can.
Yeah.
And that's always great.
Looking at beautiful art, that's a great one. All right, Sam, we're going to keep moving.
Next tip and trick is from Linda. Be in nature, whether being by a tree in your yard, a park, or looking out your apartment window at a tree, the sky. I sat outside with my journal before sunrise today. Words flowed as the stars and planets faded into the morning. Sunrise, sunset, night sky are powerful sparks for my writing.
I love it. Okay, I think we've already kind of done this for each of you to talk about how you've maintained or adjusted your routine, your writing routine with all of the distractions. So I think we'll probably pass through this one since we touched on it.
Got it. Next tip and trick is from Mark. I have a pretty intense day job that consumes not only my time, but my concentration. After about 3 days of working from home and no appointments, a little space opens up for my writer's minds, and I can think my story ideas through with better concentration. I find I'm writing more slowly and more thoughtfully now.
I love that, especially the idea of slowly and thoughtfully. All right, this question is great. All of the questions are great, obviously. We tend to write good love songs when in love, but how do we refrain from writing about deep, existential loneliness while social distancing, especially when what we want most of all is the warm hug of a loved one or the stale beer smell of our favorite bar? Which probably you guys have touched on too, but because we did talk a little bit about whether you're drawn to really writing about what's going on today, but I enjoyed this question. Anyone want to say anything? No. Okay, we'll move on.
Okay. Next tip and trick is from Toby. The Writer's Journey by Christopher Vogler has always made me consider the more elemental aspects of writing. I refer to it when it feels like my characters or story are falling flat and missing something.
And do you guys have panelists? Do you have 1 or 2 books about writing that you would recommend to folks who have a little time to read right now and might get some inspiration?
Well, I love The Writer's Journey. I love Michael Noll's book. That's a great book. I use it as a resource often. You know, of course, Anne Lamott's Bird by Bird, Stephen King's on writing, but I also just, I love craft podcasts, and it doesn't have to be a writer. It can be, you know, an architect. I just like to hear how people do what they do.
Yeah.
Also, Maya's books in the show On Story are excellent.
And free. And free.
Can I give a shout? Here I am. Look, I've even got objects that I'm.
Oh my goodness! Props.
This book came out about a week ago. How to Be an Artist by Jerry Saltz, and it's actually. It was said to me to have a look at. It's actually you don't need to have you can generate your own work. You don't need to have these props, but anything that helps is really good. But this is when it says an artist, it can be a writer or anything, but it's really inspiring. It's absolutely no bullshit. It's very thin, and I left it with a kind of hop and a skip, and it made me very happy. And I know I'm going to go back to it again and again and again and again.
I ordered a copy because you mentioned it on Twitter. So you're doing a great job. No, I'm excited to read it for sure. All right, we're going to go to the next one. So I think this is interesting. This is, wait, actually, this one was sort of hilarious to me because it's talking about kids as writers. So I have 3 kids, 9, 10, and 15, who are all pretty good writers when they want to be. Quarantining has proven itself to be a monster of an especially new and different shape when it comes to hindering motivation. Do y'all have any tips for helping to spark some give a damn in my little tech sections? So this is about, and I'm curious if any of your kids are, tend to write, and if you just have any tips for how you get younger people to get excited about putting pen to paper or fingers to keypads.
Draw a map.
Draw a map?
Yeah. Create a world, draw a map, and start to think about who's inside it.
Oh, I love that. That's great. Anyone else?
Maya, go ahead.
If we give any kind of instruction or guidance, that is the surest way to make sure it won't happen. So I find that if we just kind of have to leave her alone, but put the supplies in her room. One thing that she started doing is the movie to all the boys I've loved before, you know, and the premise is that this young girl like wrote love letters to, you know, the 5 boys that she had crushes on. So she decided that she was going to write letters to past crushes, current crushes, friends of hers, family that she never sends. And she's just been working on this on her own. So, you know, I think that was just a really cool idea. And I actually think that kind of goes back to answering one of the other questions about like, how do you document this time? And a neat way to do it is to write letters to your friends that you're never going to send. Another thing is, you know, Edward mentioned that you can visit various museums online, and the Getty Museum, they started this, I think it's like the Getty Challenge or something, and you can do a virtual tour of their museum, and then they ask you to choose 3 objects in your home to recreate the artwork. And they have just had some really creative and fun submissions, so that's a really fun one to do too.
I teach workshops to kids actually between 10 and 15 every year on occasion, well, mostly every year the last few years. And exercise they loved, and I know this might be different with siblings since they know each other, but I would have them interview one another and then either write a story about each other or use something interesting from, you know, the interview they got to then use that as a jumping off point for some, like a fictional story. So that we, you know, you're giving them some flexibility there. But it was just, it always kind of took them in unexpected places. And I think especially if you are talking about siblings, the challenge would be like, yeah, what are some things you want to ask each other that you've never thought to ask one another?
I love that idea. That's a great idea. Michael, Noll, you got anything to add?
I would just say when I've taught kids before, I find it useful to model and just like to make a game out of it. So they're not even writing anything down, you're just doing it out loud. Like you have a story and a setting and a situation, and you just start throwing things in. And, you know, depending on how old your kids are, you know, if they're really little, they're going to be just like these ludicrous, like, you know, ninjas are going to jump out and dinosaurs and stuff. And if it's like older kids, then it's like, you know, the pangs of love. But, you know, it's like, you just like get them to throw stuff together. And if something sparks them, they may want to start writing it down, or they may not. But like writing is fun, storytelling is fun. And what you're trying to do is like inspire them to like, you know, find something they want to pursue, you know, for longer on a page.
Great, thank you. All right, next one, friends.
Next tip is from Brita. Creating a schedule for myself during trying times, especially with a lot of uncertainty, has really helped me. Brita suggests checking out writingmaps.com.
Great. A friend has had her book tour canceled. Any suggestions? And I guess the question would really, you know, in my mind would be, what sort of things can you do if you're not doing a book event in a bookstore? Have you guys heard of, I mean, many writers are tackling this right now. Have any sort of thoughts about what are alternates to that, alternatives?
I'm seeing Natalia right now.
Yeah.
Oh, so the panic. So, okay. You know, everything, I think the challenge is really, because, you know, we all, like, what we're doing right now is great, right? We can actually reach more people. And so, like, for me, I feel the challenge is, like, how do you get people to show up? So I don't know, I think it'd be interesting to maybe just think of how you can, like, team up with other people who also have a book out. You know, see if you can maybe, like, maybe once some of, depending on your city's, you know, ordinances, can you arrange to have some signed copies at your bookstore that people can pre-order, you know, or order on the day of, so that way, so they have, like, they get signed copies and things like that. I'm kind of working through that, to be honest. It's like, I'm probably not the best person to ask because I'm figuring it out as I go. It's very frustrating, and I get it. But those are some things I've been exploring.
Sorry.
No, please go ahead.
I was speaking to Paul Asicki, whose book I mentioned earlier, and he started, when he has his tour dates set up, he can't travel there, of course, but what he's doing is he was going to be interviewed by somebody then, and they're still doing the interview. and the bookstores trying to help out with that. So I think all that sort of way of trying to keep up the event somehow happening, but remotely, it is really useful. And I think everybody's being very protective of the writers as they go out on this strange, this strange blank. You've published a book, and you see particularly writers who are publishing their first book and going, oh, that was it, it's gone, it's finished. But it hasn't. And actually people are being very supportive. And I think, generating it, if we're, on Twitter or whatever, we can really support each other during this.
For sure.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. All right. Next tip, Sam.
Next tip is from Sandra. If you're working from home or your workplace has shuttered, take advantage of the extra time you'd spend commuting to exercise, plan healthy nutrition, and sleep.
So true. When's the last time anyone talked about a good traffic jam in Austin? That used to be all we talked about. I would love to be talking about traffic again. Go ahead, Sam.
This next tip is from Gina. The most helpful habit I've started is meditating after reading the news / scrolling through social media. I love the app Insight Timer with guided meditations. The second habit I've started is Julia Cameron's morning page journaling before work. I put all the worries and anxieties onto the page and out of my head. This helps me stop the monkey mind and get on with my day. This next tip is from Michael. I try to only check my newsfeed a couple of times a day, once in the morning and once more just after supper. I do the same with my email. Otherwise, it's too easy to become distracted. When I post to Facebook or Twitter, I do it in short bursts, maybe 10 minutes twice a day. I try to listen to one podcast a day, usually after supper, something not related to whatever I'm currently writing. Some of my current favorites are Tiny Desk Concerts, Wait, Don't Tell Me, and Subtitle.
Props to that person for using the word supper. You don't hear that enough. I like that word.
Do you guys have any podcasts you want to recommend to the group? Anyone listening to podcasts?
I listen to Script Notes. It's a podcast that's about screenwriting and things that are interesting to screenwriters. But they have great interviews with, Greta Gerwig, Noah Baumbach, like all sorts of people, and again, just talking about their creative process.
Yeah. So here's the last question that we have, I'm pretty sure, for you guys. Writing is hard enough as it is. Now that our usual spaces may no longer be accessible, whether it be a favorite coffee shop, a hidden alcove in the public library, or a bench at the park, how do we establish new writing spaces? And how do we divest ourselves from the ever-growing uncertainty and escape into the worlds of our imagination when the walls of our reality continue to shrink and confine us? I put this one last because, no pressure, guys, but it's a big question. This is also a question that was posed by one of the undergrads in my UT class that I'm teaching, and I was so, I just loved it so much. So I guess it's almost like a parting words about how you do any of this. I think we talked a lot about not putting too much pressure on ourselves, but we've lost, these favorite spots where we write, or we're full of uncertainty. Anyone have any sort of last words for our lovely attendees or each other?
Someone had made the suggestion earlier about, moving your furniture around. I do that a lot. We live in a very, very small 2-bedroom apartment. So sometimes and I work at our dining room table. So sometimes it's just truly moving the chair around to a different side of the table, or working on my lap desk in my room, or at my daughter's desk in her room.
Just creating a new comfortable space for yourself.
And with a new beverage. Like, here I'm drinking green matcha tea. Here I drink water, It's like, this is like my new coffee shop. Yeah.
The barista was so friendly. Anyone else?
Like, kind of speaking to the second part of that question, we talk about writing a lot as an escape, like the escape into the worlds of our imagination, right? But is it so much of an escape? So much like, if you think of an escape, it's like, let's say you're in a house that's burning down and you're trying to escape, but every one of us will try to grab something that we love and hold so dear that we hope to protect, right? So I don't think it's just about leaving. It's about like, what are the things that we are going to want to hold on to and love and protect, and like write from that place, like write that, like write to preserve that, to keep that alive, you know?
Anyone want to try to top that?
I couldn't do that, but I was talking about, you know, one of the things that I love to teach when I'm teaching, I'm off teaching at the moment, is fairy tales, but thinking specifically of writers like Hans Christian Andersen, who found incredible tragedies out of an old shirt collar or a button or of small everyday objects, so that suddenly there becomes a universe of the kitchen, and suddenly, you know, the what we've seen as small tiny world of not interesting is actually fascinating. Kafka makes the mundane absolutely fascinating. We still have all this fascinating stuff with us. We live with it all the time, and writers like Andersen needed to go nowhere. Every object you pick up, every pencil has a tragedy to it. And I think actually when we shrink our world, it can actually expand at the same time.
Thank you.
I love that.
Well, everyone, I think that's it, right, Sam? So I'll just mention again that we have another webinar coming up, a live webinar with myself to talk about query letters, in case anyone wants to not, write anything else except a query letter right now, because who doesn't want to work on those gems? They're so much fun. Tune in on Thursday. I'll be talking about that, but mostly, you know, the best way right now for us to show our support of writers, of course, is to buy books. And so I would encourage you all to support an independent bookstore, and also these wonderful, wonderful panelists by picking up some of their books. I'm sure that after listening to them talk tonight, you're going to be really interested in reading what they've written. But more than anything, thank you all for joining us, all of the attendees out there. And thank you, panelists, Edward, Maya, Michael, Natalia. That's how you line up on my screen. Thank you for being here and spending your time with us, and for just all of the great stuff that you shared tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for making us think about this.
Of course. And so we'll stick around, guys, on the chat. If you want to continue chatting, you're welcome to. We'll leave it open until 10 o'clock, which I can't believe I'm saying it's almost 10 o'clock. But everybody, you know, panelists, obviously, you're welcome to leave. And yeah, that's it. Until next time, take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good
everyone.
one. Stay safe, everyone. All right.